The Senate chamber was unusually quiet, a hush that felt heavier than any formal protocol could demand. Phones were lowered, cameras zoomed in, and every eye followed Cory Booker as he rose from his seat. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Senators shifted in their chairs, some frowning with curiosity, others with guarded anticipation. Whispers fluttered like a nervous heartbeat through the marble hall, yet the weight of what was about to unfold stilled even that murmuring. Booker adjusted his notes, his expression calm but resolute, a quiet fire behind his eyes. He looked across the chamber, and for a moment, it was as if he could see beyond the walls past the political theater, straight into the conscience of the nation. Every senator felt it, the gravity of a story that demanded to be heard, not debated, not contested, simply acknowledged. Then he began. His voice, measured but unwavering, carried across the hall, cutting through the tension like a beacon. I rise today to speak about someone whose journey embodies the courage and dignity our country so often speaks of but rarely witnesses, he said. A subtle pause, a collective inhale. Her name is Jasmine Crockett. Even the most hardened faces in the room softened. Eyes widened. Some senators blinked rapidly, trying to steady themselves as Booker recounted, in brief yet piercing strokes, the sacrifices, the battles, the relentless drive of a woman who had fought not just for legislation, but for justice, for dignity, for those whose voices were often ignored. There was no fanfare, no exaggeration, only truth. The kind of truth that unsettles the comfortable and inspires the overlooked. Cameras captured the fleeting expressions of astonishment, admiration, even tears glinting in the corners of eyes. The chamber was no longer just a political stage. It was a witness to a narrative that transcended party lines, ideology, and personal ambition. The murmurs grew softer, replaced by the sound of hearts collectively recognizing heroism. What he said next left every senator in tears, and the nation stunned. In that suspended silence, the world seemed to pause, waiting for the unfolding of a story that promised more than rhetoric, but the story behind those words would shock everyone even more. Jasmine Crockett's story was not just another tale of political ascent. It was a mirror reflecting the very struggles, inequalities, and unspoken battles that millions of Americans faced every day. As Cory Booker's words echoed through the chamber, the audience, both in the Senate and across living rooms nationwide, was confronted with the weight of systemic barriers she had endured. Her journey was carved through neighborhoods that were often overlooked, through courtrooms where justice wavered, and through legislative halls where her voice was just one among many. Yet every setback, every sneer of doubt only seemed to sharpen her resolve. The stakes were immense. This was not merely a moment of recognition. It was a confrontation with the uncomfortable truths of a nation still grappling with inequality, representation, and the meaning of leadership. The senators listened, aware that the story unfolding before them was more than biography. It was a moral reckoning. They saw a woman whose achievements were earned in the face of structural obstacles, whose dedication to service demanded attention, not applause. Every legislative decision she had championed, every public speech she had delivered was now a testament to resilience in a system that rarely rewarded it. Outside the chamber, the story rippled further. Ordinary Americans recognized themselves in her struggle. The immigrant parents who worked double shifts for their children, the students striving for opportunity, despite economic hardship, the activists challenging entrenched power with nothing but conviction. Crockett's journey was an emblem of possibility, proof that integrity and courage could command respect even in the most intimidating arenas of power. It ignited a quiet thrill in those who had long felt invisible, a reminder that their voices mattered, that their stories could reach the highest levels of influence. Political commentators were already anticipating the implications. If the Senate embraced her story as more than ceremonial praise, it could shift narratives, influence legislation, and reshape public discourse. Critics, of course, were ready to challenge every word, ready to dissect, dismiss, and politicize. Yet the tension only added urgency to the moment. What happens next would define not just her career, but the conscience of the nation. Every gesture, every pause, every sentence carried the weight of history and expectation. And in that charged atmosphere, a deeper truth emerged. This was about more than politics. It was about identity, representation, and the promise of a system that had too often failed those who dared to dream beyond the limits society imposed. Each senator, each viewer, felt the gravity of the moment, the sense that they were witnessing not only the acknowledgement of one remarkable woman, but a reflection of the ideals America claimed to uphold. Even as Booker's voice continued, a hush of anticipation settled. The Senate chamber was no longer simply a place of debate. It was a stage where courage, perseverance, and moral clarity met the scrutiny of history itself. Every eye, every camera lens, every social media feed was primed for the next revelation. And then we look back at the obstacles she faced. Not everyone in the Senate was ready to rise with applause. For some, Jasmine Crockett's ascent was an affront to the comfortable status quo. There were those who had long relied on networks of influence, on inherited clout, on a politics of entitlement that assumed they could dismiss anyone who threatened their grip on power. They watched her every move with suspicion, disbelief, and sometimes outright contempt, unable to reconcile her determination with their expectations of who belonged in the corridors of influence. These figures had built careers on cynicism, on undermining anyone who challenged their dominance. They spoke of tradition, of experience, of political decorum, but their words often carried a thinly veiled arrogance. Behind polished speeches and calculated smiles, there was an impatience, a quiet assumption that someone like Crockett could be slowed, distracted, or dismissed entirely. They saw her victories not as earned accomplishments, but as disruptions, irritants in a system they believed they controlled. Some had openly mocked her in private, their laughter echoing through committee rooms and off-the-record gatherings. They underestimated the breadth of her resolve, the precision of her intellect, the courage that had carried her through the very real obstacles of her youth and early career. Every comment they made, every strategic obstruction they attempted, only framed the stakes more starkly. Here was a woman who refused to be diminished, standing against a machinery built to belittle and suppress. Their prior missteps loomed large too. Decisions fueled by pride, votes driven by convenience, policies that had failed constituents. All of it contrasted sharply with Crockett's unyielding focus on justice and service. Where they sought to maintain power for its own sake, she sought to amplify voices that had long been ignored. Where they embraced compromise as a tool for self-preservation, she wielded principle as her compass. The contrast was glaring, impossible to ignore. Arrogance facing integrity, entitlement facing merit, cynicism facing hope. Public perception had begun to shift as well. Citizens, activists, and commentators outside the Senate noticed the tension, sensing a clash not just of personalities but of values. Every obstruction the opposition attempted became another reason for public admiration for Crockett. Their resistance, meant to intimidate, only made her eventual triumph feel inevitable and righteous. It was a reminder of the stakes, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever been told their voice didn't matter, that their effort could be ignored, that the system was closed to them. And yet they remained blind to one truth. Arrogance can blind, entitlement can lull, cynicism can misjudge. They did not see her quietly studying, strategizing, preparing to meet every challenge with calm precision. They assumed her youth and idealism would falter under pressure. They believed the optics of their influence would outweigh her conviction. But history has a way of humbling the overconfident, and every underestimated hero carries the seeds of their own vindication. Their disdain created suspense in the chamber. Senators leaned forward, aware of the invisible tension between Crockett and the forces arrayed against her. Journalists noted the sharp glances, the subtle gestures, the unspoken undercurrent of doubt and defiance. Every small victory she had claimed in law, in public service, in community advocacy, became a spotlight on their failings, a mirror reflecting the emptiness behind their bravado. Frustration mingled with moral indignation, both within the chamber and beyond. Citizens who had followed her rise felt their own sense of injustice mirrored in the opposition's arrogance. The stakes had never been higher. Every senator, every observer, every social media watcher could sense it. This was not merely a confrontation of policy or politics. It was a collision of ethos versus ego, of principle versus pretense, of integrity versus entitlement. But while they underestimated her, the hero was quietly preparing her moment. Jasmine Crockett's journey was not scripted in the comfortable corridors of privilege. It was forged in late nights and early mornings, in classrooms that demanded excellence and streets that demanded resilience. From the very beginning, her path was marked by a determination that could not be taught, only earned. She grew up witnessing the quiet struggles of those around her, families working double shifts, neighbors fighting for basic rights, children facing obstacles that most adults refused to see. These early experiences were the crucible that shaped her sense of justice and her unwavering commitment to service. Law school was not a sanctuary, it was a battlefield. Crockett navigated an environment stacked with systemic challenges, where merit often battled bias, and brilliance was sometimes overshadowed by entitlement. There were professors who doubted her readiness, peers who questioned her place, and assignments that felt almost deliberately designed to test her limits. Yet she met every challenge with focus and resolve, understanding that competence alone would not suffice. Integrity, resilience, and empathy were equally critical tools. Late nights poring over case law were punctuated by community volunteering, mentoring younger students, and advocating for those who lacked a voice in the very system that would shape her career. Her early setbacks were as instructive as her victories. Campaigns she ran in her community, though fueled by genuine concern for justice and reform, were met with obstacles she had not anticipated: political machinery, entrenched interests, and the subtle biases that linger even in progressive spaces. Yet each rejection became a lesson, each closed door a prompt to seek a new route. Crockett learned to listen not for applause but for truth. She cultivated patience, strategic foresight, and a quiet confidence that no external validation could shake. Every setback strengthened her moral compass, reinforcing a belief that perseverance combined with purpose could outlast cynicism. Crockett's advocacy was not abstract or performative, it was deeply personal. She championed causes that mirrored the struggles of her own community, from criminal justice reform to equitable access to education, from housing rights to immigrant protections. She understood that law and policy were more than academic exercises. They were lifelines for those navigating systemic barriers. She immersed herself in the lives of constituents, learning their stories, their fears, their aspirations. Her victories were measured not in headlines, but in the tangible relief of families, the empowerment of communities, the hope instilled in children who now saw themselves represented. Personal sacrifices were never absent from her journey. Family gatherings missed, friendships postponed, the constant pressure of public scrutiny, all were part of the cost she accepted in pursuit of meaningful change. Yet these sacrifices were not lamented. They were embraced as necessary investments in a larger vision. Each trial reinforced her understanding of leadership. It is not the comfort of the leader that matters, but the well-being of those the leader serves. She carried with her the faces of those who had been ignored, marginalized, or dismissed, and she let their stories guide her decisions. Alongside her professional ascent, Crockett cultivated an inner resilience that distinguished her from many peers. She faced microaggressions, overt prejudice, and political cynicism with grace and measured responses. Where others might have been rattled, she remained steady. Where some sought confrontation, she sought resolution rooted in principle. Her integrity became both armor and beacon, signaling to allies and skeptics alike that her commitment to justice was neither performative nor negotiable. Mentors and colleagues who observed her rise noted the rare combination of intellect and empathy. Crockett's legal arguments were precise, her policy proposals meticulous, yet always infused with a human awareness that elevated her beyond technical expertise. She connected with people not merely through rhetoric, but through recognition of their dignity, their struggles, their potential. That ability to bridge intellect with empathy, strategy with morality, would soon become her most powerful weapon in the chamber. Every experience, every challenge, every personal and professional test had led her to this point. She was not defined by her victories alone nor by her setbacks. She was defined by her commitment to justice, her courage in adversity, and her unwavering belief that the system, though flawed, could be a vehicle for meaningful change. It was a preparation forged over years of quiet perseverance, unseen effort, and relentless dedication. Now she was stepping into the chamber where history would be made. As Cory Booker continued, the chamber seemed to shrink, every corner tense with anticipation. Senators shifted in their seats, some crossing arms in skepticism, others leaning forward, curiosity etched on their faces. The air was thick, weighted not with politics alone, but with the gravity of a story that demanded acknowledgement. Whispers fluttered between colleagues, cautious, almost conspiratorial. Questions about timing, intent, and consequence. Yet even those skeptical could not ignore the energy that had filled the room, a quiet insistence that something significant was unfolding. Booker's cadence was deliberate, each phrase chosen to command attention without theatrics. He spoke of Jasmine Crockett's formative years, her battles in courtrooms and neighborhoods, her dedication to the marginalized. Each sentence landed like a pebble in a still pond, sending ripples across the chamber. Senators exchanged glances, some narrowing eyes, others nodding slightly, caught between disbelief and admiration. The tension was palpable. They were witnessing more than a political narrative. They were witnessing a moral reckoning. Some senators whispered to one another, voices hushed yet urgent. "Can you believe this?" One murmured, eyebrows raised in surprise. Another shook their head, lips pressed tightly together as if resisting acknowledgement. Even the veteran lawmakers, hardened by years of debate and negotiation, were momentarily disarmed by the sheer clarity of Crockett's story. The room was a theater of contrasts, cynicism on one side, emerging admiration on the other, and the steady gravity of truth threading through every word Booker spoke. The pauses were deliberate, surgical. Booker allowed moments to breathe, letting the weight of each anecdote settle. A story of a single mother, supported through advocacy, hung in the air. A legal victory that had reshaped a local system echoed silently, resonating with senators who recognized the significance beyond legislative statistics. Cameras shifted, capturing fleeting expressions, some rigid, some softened, some betraying an unexpected spark of empathy. The tension was orchestrated yet organic, a dance of human reaction and raw anticipation. Even among the skeptics, curiosity began to prick at the edges of doubt. Questions that had once seemed trivial now felt urgent. How did she navigate systemic obstacles with such poise? How had she transformed setbacks into platforms for action? Some senators found themselves leaning closer, pens poised not just to take notes but to witness history in motion. The murmur of the chamber had faded into a collective intake of breath, an acknowledgement that this was more than a performance. This was a defining moment. Every glance, every subtle movement amplified the suspense. Eyes met across aisles, silent acknowledgments of the stakes, of the narrative bending the space between politics and principle. Even the staff, the aides, the photographers felt it. A story that would not be forgotten. A hero's presence felt even before she had spoken a word. The room existed in a liminal space between disbelief and recognition. The tension stretched taut like a string waiting for release. And then came the moment no one expected. Cory Booker straightened at the podium, the room holding its collective breath. Every eye was on him, every mind anticipating the narrative that was about to unfold, yet none could predict its full impact. He began, voice steady, words precise, carrying the weight of truth and the cadence of conviction. "There are stories that remind us why public service matters," he said, pausing as if to let the words sink into the marble walls. "Stories that speak to the heart of what it means to fight not for yourself, but for every person who has ever been ignored, overlooked, or underestimated. Today, I rise to tell you one of those stories. Her name is Jasmine Crockett." A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the chamber. Some senators shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward. There was a pause, deliberate, allowing the room to absorb the gravity of the introduction. Booker's eyes swept the hall, landing briefly on faces hardened by politics, faces softened by curiosity, faces already betraying the stirrings of admiration. He continued, his voice now threaded with the rhythm of narrative, detailing her early years, the long nights studying law, the community struggles she turned into platforms for justice, the relentless drive that defined every step of her ascent. She grew up in a world that demanded she prove her worth at every turn, Booker said, emphasizing each word with a measured weight. In classrooms where assumptions shadowed her potential, she refused to bow. In neighborhoods where hope was scarce, she built it. In courtrooms where justice sometimes hesitated, she became its relentless advocate. His pauses were pauses of power, each one punctuating the scope of her resilience. Senators' expressions shifted imperceptibly, a subtle softening in some, a blink or a tightening of the jaw in others, signaling the challenge her story presented to entrenched perspectives. Booker did not linger on triumphs for vanity. He illuminated the moral clarity behind them. He recounted her advocacy for marginalized families, her legislative victories achieved not for headlines but for human dignity. Jasmine Crockett's work is not measured in votes or accolades, he said, his voice rising slightly, carrying the momentum of inevitability. It is measured in lives changed, in hope restored, in courage made visible for those who had none. Another pause. A senator dabbed at the corner of an eye discreetly. Others exchanged fleeting glances, realizing they were witnessing something rare, a story that demanded both recognition and reflection. The contrast between her calm, unyielding dignity and the cynicism of her opponents became stark. Booker noted the resistance she had faced, the doubts cast by those who underestimated her, the barriers erected by arrogance and entitlement. She faced obstacles that would have broken many, Booker said, letting the weight hang in the air. Yet she met each challenge not with anger but with conviction, not with retaliation, but with the unwavering belief that justice must be earned, protected, and amplified. A silence settled over the chamber, punctuated only by the faint shuffle of papers and the subtle inhale of those beginning to feel the moral gravity of the moment. Then came the stories that cut deeper, not as political maneuvers but as human truths. Booker spoke of a single mother aided by her advocacy, a child whose future was secured because Crockett refused to accept compromise on principle, a community uplifted where hope had once faltered. Senators' eyes reflected the scenes painted, not just with words but with moral clarity and emotional resonance. A hand pressed to a chest, a slight nod, a glimmer of tears caught in a lens. These were the markers of awe, of inspiration, of empowerment. Booker's cadence shifted, becoming almost musical in its rising intensity. He illustrated her leadership as a force of inclusion, a testament to what it means to wield power responsibly. Leadership, he intoned, is not about the prestige of title or the comfort of influence. Leadership is about creating space for others to thrive, amplifying voices that have been silenced and meeting adversity with unwavering principle. Jasmine Crockett exemplifies this every day in every decision, in every battle fought quietly yet courageously, on behalf of those who cannot fight alone. The chamber was silent now, not from formality but from the weight of truth. Even the most skeptical senators could not deny the clarity of the portrait before them. Some fidgeted, uncertain how to respond, while others let tears slip quietly, ashamed of their own cynicism in the face of undeniable integrity. Booker's voice softened slightly, drawing the audience closer, almost as if he were speaking not to the chamber, but to every American who had ever faced doubt or marginalization. And so, Booker said, leaning slightly forward, eyes sweeping the room, we are reminded that courage is not loud. It is persistent. That integrity is not performative. It is unwavering. That service is not measured in recognition, but in the lives uplifted. Jasmine Crockett embodies every one of these truths. She challenges us to remember who we are, what we stand for, and why we serve. Every pause was calculated, allowing senators to feel the weight of her journey. Each anecdote, each testament of moral clarity, landed with precision. The room, once tense with anticipation, now seemed suspended in reverence. Cameras captured subtle expressions of admiration, of introspection, of awe. Social media feeds, quietly recording, would later erupt with snippets of the speech that captured the raw emotional resonance. Booker's final words were deliberate, a quiet crescendo that demanded reflection. Her story is not just hers. It belongs to every American who has struggled, every community that has been overlooked, every voice that has been silenced. Jasmine Crockett rises not for herself but for all of us, and in her rise, we are reminded of the power of courage, conviction, and unyielding principle. The room held that silence for a heartbeat longer than comfortable, the kind of pause that signals a shift in perception, a subtle realignment of thought and sentiment. Senators' expressions varied. Some whispered to colleagues, others simply exhaled slowly, moved beyond words. The narrative had landed. The moral clarity had struck. And then, as Booker stepped back, a quiet recognition spread, swelling into something palpable. The chamber erupted. But the ripple effect was just beginning. The moment Booker concluded, the reverberations were instantaneous. Cameras outside the chamber captured senators exchanging quiet, incredulous glances. But the real stage was the world beyond the marble walls. Within minutes, clips of the speech began circulating on social media, shared across platforms with headlines screaming admiration. Senate moves to tears as Jasmine Crockett's story unfolds. Booker honors a hero America needs. Hashtags like the Jasmine Crockett, courage in action, and dignity triumphs surged, trending nationally within the hour. Every share, every retweet, every post carried with it a spark of collective validation, a signal that this story resonated far beyond Capitol Hill. Commentators scrambled to dissect the moment. Morning shows replayed Booker's words in slow motion, analyzing the cadence, the pauses, the moral gravity of each sentence. Political analysts, who rarely agreed on anything, found common ground and admiration. It's not often you witness a senator honor a colleague in a way that transcends politics, one anchor noted, voice tinged with awe. This isn't just praise, it's a reminder of what leadership, courage, and service can truly look like. Podcasts amplified the moment further, inviting listeners into a shared experience, a space where admiration turned into communal pride. Celebrities added fuel to the fire. Tweets from prominent actors, musicians, and social activists praised Crockett's resilience and integrity, sharing the viral clips and framing her story as emblematic of a broader movement. "This is the courage we need in our leaders," one post read, drawing tens of thousands of likes and replies in minutes. Influencers who rarely engaged with politics found themselves compelled to amplify her journey, posting snippets, commentary, and personal reflections that intertwined Crockett's narrative with their own stories of struggle and triumph. Across communities, ordinary Americans reacted with visible excitement. Parents in kitchens replayed the speech to their children, emphasizing the power of perseverance and integrity. Students in universities shared clips with captions celebrating representation and the promise of possibility. Activists tweeted screenshots emphasizing the lesson that dedication to justice could indeed move even the most rigid institutions. The ripple effect was electric, a surge of shared pride, empathy, and inspiration sweeping through networks far beyond traditional media channels. Even conservative outlets, initially cautious, found themselves reporting the event with reluctant respect. The story had transcended partisanship. It demanded acknowledgement. Headlines noted her calm dignity, her accomplishments, and the moral clarity Booker had highlighted. Social media debates erupted, but the framing was undeniable. Crockett's journey had captured the nation's imagination, a rare moment of universal admiration in a fractured landscape. Memes began to circulate, as they always do in moments of viral impact. But unlike trivialized humor, these memes carried celebration and respect. Images of Crockett's calm composure juxtaposed with Booker's powerful introduction flooded feeds, with captions emphasizing resilience, moral authority, and perseverance. Even short-form video creators recreated the emotional beats of the speech, layering commentary that highlighted the stakes she had overcome, ensuring that each iteration spread her story to younger, digitally native audiences. The emotional resonance was palpable. Users commented not only on Crockett herself, but on the inspiration her journey provided for their own lives. "This gives me hope," one post read. "I can see myself in her struggle and her triumph." Others shared personal stories of mentorship, activism, or resilience, forming a network of collective validation. Each acknowledgement, each story added momentum, a confirmation that her rise symbolized more than political success. It represented the affirmation of identity, of effort, of courage against the odds. By the evening, mainstream news had caught up with the online frenzy. Evening broadcasts highlighted both Booker's tribute and Crockett's role in reshaping perceptions of leadership, representation, and justice. Social feeds buzzed with a mix of pride and aspiration, and the conversation extended beyond policy into the realm of values and ideals. For many, the lesson was clear. One act of recognition, one story told with moral clarity, could ignite a movement, inspire action, and remind the public of what leadership should embody. Yet the story was far from over. Jasmine Crockett's story was no longer just a narrative confined to a Senate chamber. It had become a symbol, a mirror reflecting the values that Americans often speak of but rarely see enacted with such clarity. Her journey from classrooms and courtrooms to community halls and legislative chambers stood as a testament to the power of dignity, perseverance, and unwavering moral clarity. In every setback she had endured, in every barrier she had faced, she had demonstrated a principle too often absent in public life: that integrity, above all, defines true leadership. The broader lesson was unmistakable. In an era where cynicism often dominates headlines, Crockett's rise reminded the nation that service matters more than spectacle, and courage matters more than comfort. Leadership was not a measure of popularity, entitlement, or partisanship. It was a measure of commitment to others, of the willingness to stand firm when the easy path might be to compromise or retreat. Her story illuminated the moral compass that could guide not just legislators but every citizen. That action rooted in principle can move hearts, change minds, and reshape institutions. Across the nation, people reflected on what her journey represented. Young activists saw in her example a roadmap for their own advocacy, the importance of persistence, strategic patience, and moral focus. Immigrant communities recognized in her determination echoes of their own struggles, a validation of the effort and resilience that often go unnoticed. Parents shared her story with children not merely as inspiration, but as evidence that one person's courage can ripple outward, influencing communities and shaping the conscience of a nation. Every audience, whether in the chambers of power or living rooms across the country, felt the resonance of her achievement. Dignity and perseverance are contagious, and they demand recognition. Even the most hardened skeptics could not deny the truth that had unfolded. Those who had questioned, opposed, or doubted her faced a silent reckoning. The realization that merit, principle, and relentless commitment cannot be suppressed indefinitely. Crockett's triumph was not a personal victory alone. It was a vindication of the values that define a just and equitable society. Integrity had triumphed over cynicism, courage over indifference, and service over self-interest. In a world where the optics of power often overshadow its substance, her example shone as a beacon of what is possible when values guide action rather than ambition alone. The emotional closure extended beyond admiration into inspiration. Citizens felt empowered not merely by her achievements, but by the reminder that they too could act with courage and conviction. Crockett's story reinforced that public service is not limited to politicians. It is a daily choice to uphold fairness, dignity, and justice in one's own sphere of influence. Her narrative became a call to action, subtle yet compelling. Every small act, every principled decision contributes to a collective movement toward equity and humanity. Her story also highlighted a universal truth about resilience. Life, society, and politics are filled with obstacles, some overt, some subtle. But persistence paired with purpose can create outcomes that reverberate far beyond the individual. By refusing to compromise on core values, Crockett transformed challenges into platforms for progress, setbacks into lessons, and opposition into opportunities to demonstrate moral clarity. The lesson was not abstract. It was tangible, lived, and replicable by anyone willing to act with courage. And as the Senate chamber fell silent, the nation watched and reflected, realizing that the applause, the viral clips, and the commentary were only symptoms of a deeper resonance. Jasmine Crockett's journey was a reminder that leadership grounded in integrity, empathy, and relentless pursuit of justice could inspire a generation, shift perspectives, and redefine what it means to serve. Her story became both a blueprint and a challenge, to act boldly, to stand firm, and to believe in the power of one individual to influence many. And that's the legacy every citizen can carry forward. Jasmine Crockett's story, as highlighted by Cory Booker, is more than a political moment. It is a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of integrity. From her early struggles to her relentless advocacy, every step of her journey reminds us that leadership is defined not by title or influence, but by the impact we have on the lives of others. Her calm dignity, her unwavering commitment to justice, and her ability to rise above cynicism show us what it truly means to serve. The Senate may have held its breath, social media may have erupted, and the nation may have paused to witness this remarkable tribute. But the lesson is for all of us. It is a call to recognize the heroes in our communities, to amplify voices that fight for dignity, and to take inspiration from those who turn obstacles into platforms for change. Jasmine Crockett's story is a mirror, reflecting the potential within each of us to act with courage, purpose, and compassion. If her journey moved you, share this story. Let friends, family, and colleagues witness the example of perseverance and integrity that can change minds and hearts. Reflect on your own role in shaping communities, and let her story inspire action in your daily life. Whether through advocacy, mentorship, or simply standing up for what is right. And if you want more stories that celebrate courage, challenge injustice, and honor the principles that truly define leadership, make sure to subscribe, engage with this channel, be part of the conversation, and join a community that believes in uplifting heroes, inspiring change, and witnessing history when it unfolds before our eyes. The story of Jasmine Crockett is not over. It lives in every act of courage, in every voice that refuses to be silenced, and in every one of us who chooses integrity over indifference. Share it, remember it. Let it inspire.